Hello, my name's George English. I'm the Director of Research Through People. Brick walls, we're all familiar with them, aren't we? How on earth do we break them down and get through? So we made this video for you to give you a few ideas of approaches and different ways you can do it and include a couple of examples. So hopefully that will give you some inspiration to go away and try and solve your own brick walls. If you get too stuck, then there's always us you can come and ask. So let's have a look at this. And basically, the number one approach is to use analysis and logic. Typically with the brick wall, of course, plan A hasn't worked and we need to use something else. And very often by thinking logically, we can get through to a possible answer. Creativity. Sometimes we have to think out of the box, so to speak, and think what else might have happened, and that may give us inspiration to where to look or where we might find information. Help from friends and relatives. So relatives, distant cousins and people may have information that will help us. But in that list I include archivists and librarians. We're very lucky with the quality of archivists and librarians we have. Very, very helpful people. Never be afraid to go and ask. Luck can play a part. I can give you lots of examples where I thought I'd given up and then suddenly something came through. And it's interesting, cost and time. If you've got all the time in the world, you can carry on looking, carry on looking. When we're working for a client, what we're trying to do is use our time as effectively as possible within the budget that's been agreed, and the approach can be different because of that. So, recording and transcription error is one of the most common sources, that the name wasn't spelt exactly like you expected it to be. And there are various techniques to explore other possible spellings and so on and so forth. Wildcard sound X that may help us there. Even the official scribes, registrar and enumerator made mistakes, sometimes because the person was illiterate and they just wrote down what they heard. When you're reading old handwriting, misreading the letters is very common. Abbreviated first names, you're looking for William, but in fact it's been written just WM, so there are other options there. Unless it's more, don't put down every single thing you know necessarily, because that may actually exclude possible answers. Very often the good thing to do is to put down 2 or 3 and then look through the long list that comes out and see if that helps you. And with reading old names, there's all sorts of geographical names that we don't know. But if we get a map out or something like that, very often we can see, oh, it looks like that name, and that may be the one. Handwriting. How much time have you got? Particularly going back in time, handwriting was more and more difficult to read, paleology and so forth, and 300-400 years ago or more, we've got big problems normally. And save your searches. So what I'm going to do now is show you, I've talked about this subject at a number of conferences and so on, show you a brief clip from Who Do You Think You Are conference, when I talked about this, and I start with the recording and transcription errors there.
Right, moving on. Here's a list in a way which you may notice. The transcription error is probably the most common problem we have. Do get good at using asterisks instead of letters, wildcards, things like that, play around, etc. Not only the transcription may be wrong, but the registrar enumerator may have got it wrong, etc. Less is more. If you really get stuck, you tend to want to put in, well, this is the A and this is the place. Sometimes try just putting nothing in and getting a list that you can look at and evaluate. There are various ways of doing this. Various other things. I'm not going to go into paleology here. Just another dimension, isn't it? But save your searches. Again, trying to get Scotland's people to allow us to save searches when we go. It's so important. Wills are obviously a source. The good thing about Scotland's people, you can search the wills for free. But it's like a census sometimes. A person leaves money to their sons and daughters. This was a fantastic one I came across a couple of months ago. In fact, this is only half of the will. The guy's listing people, listing people in America, brother-in-laws, all sorts of things, etc. So it gives you a fantastic information. You're very lucky to get that much, but typically you can get, obviously, sons and daughters. And on Scotland's people, as I say, you can do this for free. Be a bit careful. Very often there's a will and an inventory. It's the will which probably has your information. You decide whether you want the inventory as well. Here's one where James Thompson was born in Aberdeenshire, Banbury, Devonick, in 1848. He went out to India, spent his whole working life in India. All of his children were born there, and then he retired now down to England to St Albans. So I finally worked out the births of all the children. He had 4 daughters and a son by the first wife, then 2 daughters and a son by the next one. Newspaper obituary. This is.
And here is the newspaper entry, and the mourners included, and almost certainly, which actually says sons, but these are the children or the close relatives and friends as well, of course. But again, this may give you information that you haven't been able to get elsewhere. So I'm going to take the genealogist's nightmare is when you come across someone called John Smith, because obviously there's lots of John Smiths. So here was a fascinating example. So Hugh Fleming Smith, here is his death, and he was an interesting character as it happens, but his father was John Bruce Smith. Now that can help a lot. Instead of John Smith, John Bruce Smith. So it narrows down the field quite a lot, and his wife, or Hugh's mother, was Henrietta Willison. We'll come back to Hugh in just a moment. But again, let's see a clip when I'm talking about the Smiths.
Again, we've got the address, we've got his age, and look at the father, John Bruce Smith. So we've got a clue to narrow down that John Smith, we hope. And it often says, are the parents deceased or not? Yes, so that gives, I know John Smith and his mother died before 1922, and what he died of and so on. In fact, it's interesting, the granddaughter of this Hugh Smith was a nurse. She was actually fascinated by cause of death. And of course, in the 1800s, very often the cause of death was something that wouldn't kill us now, or it's a name that we've forgotten. But we get information from that. And then we get the census. Again, a tremendously valuable document, isn't it? And here we have Hugh Smith and his family in 1901. So by this time they've got 2 children. And what we get particularly is the age, if it's accurate. We get where they were born. And this was 1841 when it's just the county. And we get the occupation. So we're starting to get some information which I think is about bringing the person to life. We'll talk more about that as we go through.
So there's Hugh Smith. Here's the census that I was showing on the screen there. Hugh Smith and his wife Maggie, and the 2 young children, Maggie and John, just 2 months old, they're living in Kilmarnock. And what we get in the census is the age, what occupation Hugh Smith had, block cutter, and where they were born. In fact, in this case, all of them were born in Kilmarnock. But the brick wall here was the father. So we know he's John Bruce Smith. We know when he was born, but just here we are. We know when he got married, 1849, and here 1851 census, and there is his age. So he's born about 1822 in Perth, and so on and so forth. There's his wife, and here's just starting a family. Now, when he died, I found his grave in Kilmarnock. He's buried on the 26th of September 1906, and you can see I've circled there he was aged 85, which agrees exactly with the information we had beforehand. But so I would know when he died within a couple of weeks. Could I find his death? I looked all over the place, and one thing you learn to do is give a few years either side just in case the age hasn't been recorded correctly. But would you believe eventually I found it? He died 2 days before then. I looked for John Bruce Smith, narrowing it down, hadn't found anyone because his death record was John Smith. And here, his age on his death record is recorded as 65, not 85. Wow. So I hadn't had any of the problems I expected, the brick walls I expected with John Smith. What I had was a transcription error of quite a large size. Now, one of the things that through my career I've worked in improvement and problem solving and so on and so forth, I want to try and do is bring to bear all those techniques, problem solving approaches and so on that I've learnt. Now, I've never ever seen a genealogist use cause and effect analysis, which is a very powerful technique, and it's as powerful in genealogy as anywhere else. So what we have here, we can't find this. In this case it was someone called Pilgrim. We couldn't find their ancestry at first. And what cause and effect analysis does, it breaks down that cause into various possible effects. Records, people, in this case access, and standard. So what might be the cause of not being able to find this? So it might be in the records wrong information, it might be the record hasn't survived, or it might be a transcription error, as we've talked about there. People, in fact, they might not be living in this is in Lincolnshire as it happens, they may be living in another county, therefore the record is elsewhere. A common name like Smith can obviously give problems. A different religion, it may be a Catholic whose records were recorded separately. Access, now, if we live a long way from where the records are, that can be a big problem. Fortunately now with the internet that's becoming less of a problem. One of the things we do, we have various genealogy subscriptions so we can get access to records which you may not be able to do. And a lack of local knowledge, it obviously helps in most cases to know the area and where records are and various other things that are relevant. And then the standards, so on time within budget. And as I hinted beforehand, if we work into a budget, then if it goes outside that, that can be a cause. If we haven't got the time to do this, then again, that can be a signal. It's just a technique you may not be able to. So that's a flavour of the sort of things that go into breaking down brick walls. It's fascinating. I think one thing most genealogists enjoy is actually problem solving, and it's frustrating at one extent, but very rewarding when you do break these things down. So I hope that's helped you. If you want to get in touch, feel free. We have a free consultation to look at what we may do on your behalf and get back to you with what we suggest in terms of what it would cost and how far we would go on your behalf. We've got videos on YouTube, all sorts of videos. This will be on fairly soon. So please get in touch. We look forward to hearing from you.